It started as a small idea, a way to reach out to the members of the Aboriginal community through the north who visit the University Hospital of Northern BC. A few signs or works of art, something familiar to welcome those living with pain or visiting family and friends. But that small idea quickly turned into something bigger, a 16 by 4 foot carving. An impressive work of art, now on permanent display in the hospital's atrium. A sign of welcome, full of history.
The majority of the people that access the hospital from all around the north are First Nations and of Aboriginal descent. If you go into the hospital any given day, you'll see numerous family members in the lobby, and a lot of our people suffer from medical conditions, chronic illness, and acute and emergency circumstances. So when they're all in there worried and you know, traumatized and stressed out about their loved ones, we thought, you know, it'd be good to have something that invites them in and they can relate to.
There was a feeling that we needed to demonstrate more cultural sensitivity and cultural appropriateness in our facilities. And places like UHNBC need to be more welcoming for the First Nations people who live in this community and reflect their culture and some of the things that are important to them. And art is a really important part of the First Nations culture. And so the idea of adding some art to the atrium of UHNBC came from that.
Many of our people use hospital services quite a bit, and many people feel alien to the environment there. So by putting a plaque or a carving that depicts First Nations culture, I think will make them more welcoming.
The welcoming strategy came from the Aboriginal Health Improvement Committee, which strives to provide culturally sensitive health care to First Nations living in the Northern Health area. As the idea began to grow and come together, local artist and experienced carver Peter George was enlisted to help.
You know, originally they wanted just pieces of artwork around the hospital, you know, and then native language saying, you know, like emergency room, and, you know, or so we got them to think a little bit bigger and came up with 16 feet long.
George turned to fellow artist and family services support worker Clayton Gauthier to take on the project. Both saw it as an opportunity to share culture and teach some of the old ways, almost forgotten.
I was hired to bring culture to Carrier Sekani as far as working with all of the people in our programs. So it just came natural to get them involved.
We suggested too to do it with the groups that I co-facilitate, men's group, father's group, kids groups. So it was a chance for the children to learn, and plus even the adults getting a sense of identity and knowledge of their own culture. The
whole initiative behind the carving project was to bring culture back into the lives of the youth and those that are a little troubled.
The importance of the project became obvious. First Nations people supporting their own, and that idea shows through in the design concept. The symbols depicted, mostly animals, incorporate the clan system, the matriarchal lineage and government that was used by the First Nations for centuries, a way of life that has been lost over the years.
The three bottom, as you can see, the three bottom sculptures there of the beaver, frog, and the grouse are the three main clans that support all the rest of the clans above it. And that's why it's important to show that, you know, that Lheidli is honored, you know, to welcome other people and other nations into the territory.
Traditionally, there was only the three clans. There was Frog Clan, Beaver, and Grouse. And recently, Caribou had returned. And because it's Lheidli Tene territory, we just put those on the bottom. So those four clans are from this area, and they're holding up all of the other clans for the Northern Interior Health Region. So it was quite easy. I put the three, the frog, the grouse, and the beaver on the bottom. Above that is the caribou, and then above that Locally, they call it Bear Clan, but the further west and north you go, it's Wolf. So I decided to put the wolf in there to represent all those other different areas. And then the coastal people had used raven and eagle. Also, the further west you go, they have little man in Stilako, and caribou is used in Lheidli, but they work together in the feast hall. So I decided to put the little man in there as well. Sun and the moon, well, those things are things that we need to live with, and they're also house crest designs that actually belong to my father's clan. And also, the eagle represents peace and friendship locally. Like all of the Carrier people have peace and friendship.
Coming up after the break, the concept becomes a reality as hundreds offer their hard work and spirit to the carving project. The concept began to become a reality with hard work ahead. After several tons of Western red cedar arrived in Prince George, a donation from Northern Health, it was Clayton's job to piece together the 4 by 16-foot canvas in a traditional way without the use of nails or screws.
We had like a 16-inch drill bit, and we drilled each hole and had 1-inch dowels, hammered it in, glued it. So there's no nails, no screws, no metal at all. We wanted to keep it from Mother Earth, right? So that's kind of a rule, I guess, in our culture, is work with what we have from Mother Earth.
When we first got it, that stuff was still wet. So, and it was in 16-foot lengths by 1 foot wide and 4 inches thick. So they figured like each piece probably weighed at least 200 to 300 pounds, right? When it was still wet and green. So in the end, they figured it was somewhere between 500 and 600 pounds.
Once the pieces were put together, the carving began. Through the fall, hundreds of people passed through the doors of the room that housed the carving at the South Fort George Family Resource Center. Hours were spent whittling away at the fragrant wood with traditional handmade tools. Community members learned while carving, and the carvers passed on the ancient thoughts and beliefs of their elders.
I've learned so much about the clans, and how to work with the wood, how to use your tools where you're not stressing. Let the tool do the work. You're the only one that's guiding it, right? So it's kind of like reading the wood and knowing what's next, what's the next step.
Whether young or old, of First Nations descent or not, those who had a chance to carve a piece of history left with a sense of accomplishment and left their spirit in the massive piece of artwork.
We had a number of schools come in, a number of youth, and of course Carrier Sekani Family Services has children in care that come in, as well as the Peter and Clayton work with men's and fathers groups, and there are some women's, and I think it's a girl power group. So those groups got to come in and learn about the clan system that was depicted on the carving.
I met a lot of people through this process. Just thinking about how many people I shook hands with, and how many people were just amazed, how many tears were shed over it just from looking at it, and tons of groups. 1 week we had I think 11 groups come through. That's 1 week, so we've met a lot of people, touched a lot of people. People are so thankful that this was happening.
One of the learnings for us is how important visible reflection of people's culture is. And for Aboriginal people and First Nations people, that's really important. And having many hands touch the carving and be part of producing it, it really brings to life the meaning of that piece of art. One
of the many groups to stop by and lend a hand was the Northern Health Board. It was the first meeting between that group and the Carrier Sekani board. A talking feather was passed and stories shared. It was an evening to remember.
It was a very good start to a working relationship and collaboration. So the carving means much more than just recognizing the First Nations people in Northern BC, but also very significant in terms of building working relationships between the First Nations people and the health system.
When they're involved in something like this, they take ownership. They asked a lot of questions, and I was happy to answer all the questions that they threw my way about clans, culture, history, all of that. So yeah, it was a learning experience for them, plus, you know, a lot of them never knew what any of those tools were for, so they actually got to carve and use those tools and be a part of it. And we gave them little sections that they could carve, and a lot of them didn't want to leave. One guy from Northern Health, he came down, he flew into town for the meeting, but you know, we had a lot of traditional food there, you know, smoked salmon and everything else. And rather than eat, he wanted to keep on carving because he'd never had a chance to do it before, and he probably never would again, he said. So he just bypassed the whole thing and carved all the way through until he had to leave to catch his plane.
But the project didn't come without challenge. The huge slab of cedar had a spirit of its own, cracking several times, making the carving work sometimes difficult.
Two of the pieces were really difficult to carve. They tested our patience continuously. Actually, we had one of my knives busted on it. So you hang on to it just like the knife, like this. Keep it flat.
On top of that, lead carver Peter George ran into some health problems, which pushed back the deadline of the work.
We had some minor hiccups along the way with Peter's medical conditions, and we kind of stalled and stopped, started. Peter would take his medical leave, and Clayton would, you know, do what he could without Peter, because he was, of course, apprentice.
During its creation, hundreds of hands touch and help shape the carving.
Well over 200. We quit counting around 200, and so yeah, anywhere between 200 and 300 people, I guess.
And as the carving began to take form, George and Gauthier continued to share their experience, one that was life-changing for the young woodworking apprentice.
I'm still amazed with it. It's when we got told about this and it's happening, I thought I was dreaming, and I felt like I walked into the right place in my life, and good things happen to good people, I guess, and this thing just fell together, and it fell kind of on my lap, and I was like, sure. I still can't believe it.
Clayton was just an awesome student. He was eager to learn, and you know, never really had to worry about him. He just followed, he watched and learned, and then if he had questions, then it was really easy to work with him. So probably one of the best students I ever had. So
Culture is healing. So if you become and know more about your culture, where you're from, who you are better apt at life in general.
After months of fashioning the symbolic totems, the painting began. Done by hand in free form, the bright colors accentuating the clan crests and bringing life to the animals depicted. Coming up, finally the artwork is unveiled to the community, and its purpose of storytelling begins. Exhausting emotionally, the 600-pound piece of artwork was completed in roughly 5 months. Then came the time to allow others to share in the spiritual experience.
When we moved it to the Civic Center, and when it first got stood up, I think that was the most powerful feeling when that happened. It was just amazing seeing it standing, because seeing it flat down for how many months straight, that's what I was waiting for. And when it happened, it was just amazing, just powerful feelings.
The carving was moved to the Civic Center, where a day-long potlatch and feast unveiled it to members of the host nation and special guests.
Oh, I just was stunned. When we had the potlatch and it was unveiled, I was stunned. It's a remarkable piece of work, and I think the artist is inspired. I think it's just a great piece of work and a wonderful legacy.
It was beautiful. It was more beautiful than I had anticipated, because I'd just seen it flat and I hadn't seen it completely finished. So it was very beautiful and stunning, really.
The artwork was then blessed in a feather ceremony, an honor reserved only for the highest of occasions. Following the celebration, the carving, led by the Raven and the Eagle, was shuttled through the snowy night to the University Hospital, where it was immediately placed in its permanent location.
This form of art is anchored in the northwest of Canada. It's a form of art that is internationally recognized, but it's home here. And by having it here, it says that this is home, and it proclaims the fact that we're on Aboriginal territory, and we welcome that and we celebrate that.
The following day, community members gathered at the hospital to get a first glimpse of the traditions given life through the hours of creation.
For our own staff, I think it is an indication that we need to understand the cultures that we work with, and we need to understand the First Nations people who live in this part of the world and that we provide healthcare services to.
I hope it gives them a sense that it is their facility as well, and that they can be comfortable in making sure that they receive appropriate services, and hopefully that they would be welcome in the institution, and vice versa. Hopefully talk to the staff there and educate them about who they are and where they come from, because they do have a rich culture that has spanned from time immemorial.
The work offers a solace and beauty to anyone who walks into the hospital, whether Aboriginal or not. Since its installation, it has become a conversation piece and a chance for First Nations to teach others about their beliefs.
The most significant thing for me is 40 years ago in the 60s, they outlawed all cultural aspects of First Nations life. And I remember reading different articles in my studies of how they would, the law enforcements and governments would take all of our artwork and masks and boxes and different things, take them straight from the community and burn them. So we've come a long way since that time. It's been 40, 50 years, and now we're seeing our artwork and our culture revitalized and back into society and mainstream societies.
I hope it sends a number of messages. First of all, that the acknowledgement that the Aboriginal people here were here for thousands of years, and they developed a distinctive culture, and we celebrate that culture. For First Nations people and Aboriginal people coming into the hospital, I hope it says to them that this is theirs, that it's a home for them as well as for other people.
It's hoped the piece of artwork will speak to whoever walks through the doors of the hospital and will act as a talisman for those who come from northern BC communities far and wide.
Well, it shows in the spirit of all different nations that that's who we are. That's who we are, and we always like to welcome and share what we have with the other nations within our territory.
Welcome, like this is a part of art that's like getting lost, right? Carving and stuff like that. You don't see that too much these days. So I think what I would like people to see is have that respect for what it is, and to understand who we are as people, as Native people.